There is so much to do when it comes to alignment. Now, the few properties that we saw earlier wouldn't be enough for alignment, and there's so much we need to do with alignment. Now we'll see how it gets complex, but at the same time, when you know or understand the basics well, I believe it is not as complex as people say. So we now will focus on a property called position, and there is also a property called left, right, bottom, and top. So we'll see what that is. Now just ignore this humongous amount of text. I just have this lorem ipsum text to make sure we have a vertical scrolling. With that, let me start this page with the style. Link. Okay, let me introduce a div here, and I'll also give a class to it. Static class. I'm gonna say position is static. I'll tell you what position is. Now, the position of any element, whether it be div, paragraph, or whatever tag it may be. Now, by default, the position is static, meaning whatever we saw earlier, like it usually goes with the flow of this document, like however this document is arranged. So this comes first and this comes next, all that, right? So that is the default behavior or the default position. Now, static position. You see this text static position. Let me give a gap. Just created a class called gap. Now we don't need anything called since we are actually following these naming conventions and the coding standards, let's avoid these kind of names. Static element. This gap is something that I could give here. So wherever I need a gap, I could use it. So see, it is a gap. Just to give a clarity on the example and the leftover lorem ipsum content. Again, lorem ipsum is basically gibberish text to fill a page for trying out examples, or to see, when you're working on websites, to see how the content would come. You might not know what content might come before the client or the product owner gives. So you could try with this lorem ipsum content, which is available in the website for free. Now, this div element has something called position static. Now, this position static, this will work like how your normal layout is. So this div comes first, and then this, and then this. So exactly that's how it will work. So even if I don't give position static for this div or this div, by default, browser's behavior is to consider them as static. So that's not a complicated property, but there is another property called relative. Now we'll see that. I'm gonna add another gap. So wherever I use this gap, the height would be 200 pixels, so that we will have a gap. Now this is called relative position. Now what relative position does is, let's refresh. So we have this relative position after this gap. Now this is also by default behaving like a static position. Now let me give this a class. Even if I remove this class, it's not going to make any effect because by default it is using static position. Now I'll say relative element. Position is relative. We could also use these borders to understand where the elements really stands. See that? At the same time, we give a border here. What happened? Nothing happened, right? It is also behaving like how the static position is behaving. But we just said it is relative, but we didn't say how it has to behave. So when we call any element as div, any element as relative, it will behave related to its position. Its position in the sense this is its normal flow, right? So it will come after the gap, and this is where it has to start. Now considering this particular spot as a position, you could give 4 values to it, any of these 4 values, which is right. So okay, I'll show what is left. If I say 50 pixels from this spot, it will move 50 pixels to the right. Okay, so it knows that this is its original position. So from its position, it's relatively 50 pixels apart. So that's what it does, right? So I could give a top 100 pixel. So from this spot, it will go 100 pixels down. And since we have already given left, it will go 50 pixels this way. So see, but did you notice that even when it is going, moving all these places, this text is not moved. So meaning we can even do an overlap. Give a red. Okay, 200 pixels. Let me try 300. See? So it doesn't really abides by the law of the documents flow. All it is bothered about is it is relative to its position from here. So wherever you want to give left or top, it works that way. Now let's say I take out this left and I say it's right. So what I'll do is from right, it will move to 50 pixels this way. But the size of this text, right? Let me go back to left again. If you see, even when we give left, the div is actually crossing the viewport, our viewport. So what we could do is, let's see if the viewport really works. Now we can see if giving viewport makes any changes to this thing about exceeding the viewport itself. It doesn't make any difference because it has already occupied this whole block, and relatively it just moves itself, and this viewport meta tag, it doesn't make any difference. So what we could do with this width, we have options for that. Now I could give a lesser width. That way it's shrink to it. Why not give a background color so that we could see it very well? Okay. Yeah. So the width is 500 pixels, but from the left it is moved to 50 pixels. Now give another right. So when I give right, even now it is trying to move from this spot, it is moving. Okay. So let's try something else here. So from this spot, it moved 50 pixels. Let's try a minus value. Let's see what happens. When I do a minus, it just moves from here. Because from right, it tries to push 50 pixels. So it ended up here. What else can we try? We can even try a bottom. Let's say bottom 0 pixels. So 0 pixels from here. Take this right out. Try 100 pixels. See, this is a spot. From this spot, there has to be 100 pixels from its bottom. And from this spot, there has to be, when we give something like left, there has to be 50 pixels on the left. Likewise, there has to be, from this spot, there has to be 50 pixels on this right. So this is the corner that has been considered. Let me try to remove this and show. So this corner of the div element and this particular position of its parent, which is inside the body, right? So this is directly inside the body. So this exact position and this is what is being mapped. Now that is why when we give something like right 100, okay, let me try right 10 pixels. Now it is trying to push this dot from this exact spot like 10 pixels away. So that's what it is trying to do. So I'll leave it at left and top. So that's relative position. And we should keep this in mind. This left, right, and top and bottom cannot be used without using position. So if you just take this out, I don't think it will work. Yeah. So it won't work. Now let's get on to a very interesting position. This is what is called a fixed element, a fixed position. Now the fixed position stays accordingly to the viewport and it doesn't leave anywhere. This one is a very interesting position. I'm gonna say bottom. Okay, let's first do a right 0, bottom 0. You couldn't notice, right? But you will notice once I give a background color, because it is right now black on black. A black text above a black text, so that's why you couldn't see. Background color is yellow. See, so yeah, let's try to give a border to this. The width. So this is it. So, but when you give this fixed, right? When you give fixed the right, so instead of giving 0 or 0 pixel, it doesn't make any difference. But when you give fixed, this is what happened. Like, let me try to give a 100 pixel value here. Now it is trying to act accordingly to the viewport of it, to the viewport, not to the original position like how we had in relative position. Now this left top, all this with relative position, it works to whatever it's the document flows position should have been. So it's related to that. But when you give something like position is fixed, the right values and the bottom values and top values and the left values, all it's corresponding to the viewport. Remember what's a viewport? The view, whatever view you could see in your browser. So if you reduce to it, so that's the view. So meaning if you give something like right 0 pixel, so it is trying to make sure that it is 0 pixel from the right. So that is why it is here. Now if you just start giving 100 or something else, it will go accordingly. So it is fixed to the position. Now you can't imagine this coming out of here. So that won't happen. So it is fixed to the viewport itself. And we say bottom is 0. So from the bottom it is 0 pixels. Okay, this is a very interesting position, right? We'll try bottom 200 pixels and 200 pixels. Now see, no matter how you move, you would see that this is coming away like 200 pixels from the bottom and 200 pixels from the right. That is how the fixed position works with the viewport. And there's something called absolute position, and this could be tricky, and I would not recommend this to be used. So unless we have no other choice, let's not use this. Because all this actually disturbs the flow, right? No. Absolute element. Let's see what this one does. Absolute position. So what happened with absolute position? This is not the usual behavior of absolute element. Now right 200 pixel is something that we gave. Okay, so absolute, what it does is it will always look for its nearest positioned ancestor. Okay, so if I give this absolute position inside the static element, let's see what happens. So this is the static position, right? Now in absolute position, all I said was right 0 pixels and width 300 pixels. It went to the right. Let's see what happens if I move it to the relative position div. So in the relative position div, absolute position always looks for its position relative to this class, right? It is always absolute, or say it is very obedient to its parent. Now let's say let me just try to move the relative position now. Let's say I say the left is 100 pixel. For this, I'm just giving for relative element. Now when this moves, this also moves. So this absolute position, when I give something like this, let's see, it is along, so it is supposed to be after, let's say this is the parent, right? The relative position is a parent and this is a child. Obviously, as a normal flow, this is where it should be. So whenever you try to change its parent, this will also go, but it won't push the page. So it's not pushing that. Let's give some values to it. Left 100 pixels. What happens? So it is moving left from this, right? So moving from the parent. Top 100 pixels. I think it's already 100 pixels from the, oh sorry, I didn't give that. So it's from the top, it is moved to 100 pixels. So from bottom, this element is 100 pixels. See, so that's why I said not to use absolute elements. So it typically breaks the flow. But there are some scenarios where you might need it. So then you have to use it. Let's try 300 pixels. Okay, so from here, so there has to be 300 pixel from this spot to this spot is what it is trying to do. So okay, let's see what happens if we keep this inside a static position. So this is a default place it has to be, right? So it's where now, so right 300 pixels. So when it comes to static, it behaves differently. It takes 300 pixels from the right. So pretty much from the viewport element. So exactly like how it takes in the viewport, like how fixed takes, that's how it also takes. Now let's try inside the fixed position. So in the fixed position, I'm going to take this out. Where is it? We don't see that because it is above the fixed position, and no matter where the fixed position goes, absolute element will also go there. So I'm gonna give 10 pixel. So it'll move 10 pixel from here. Let me give right 30 pixel. See what happens. It'll move 30 pixel from here. So absolute position will always look for its position to its parent. And finally, we have something called sticky. Sticky elements are pretty interesting. I mean, it is a combination of relative and fixed. We'll see that. But the sticky element are not supported in Internet Explorer, and Safari might require a WebKit. We'll see what that WebKit is. Sticky position is here. So sticky is here, but we didn't say any position to it. I'm gonna say position is, oops, position we already gave. Top 0. See what happens when we scroll. So sticky, what it does is it'll stay with the flow. So this is the flow, right? So first we have this element, and then these elements, and then we have sticky position. So that's the flows. But when you keep scrolling to it, when it finds that finds this top, so whatever we have given now, say if I say 300 pixels, let's say this is where it is. But when it finds the position, it'll just stick to it. Could you even use right? So I think left makes sense. Okay, left will make sense if we try to scroll it. See, it is from the left 200 pixel. We'll try to stay there. So it's already on the left 200 pixel from the left. And no matter how we scroll, this is how it is going to be. So just keep this in mind. Use the positions wisely. Make sure you don't mess up your web page.